Everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're doing a quick review, kind of a pilot's perspective on the wonderful HoneyComb Aeronautical Alpha Flight Control Yoke and Switch Panel. Let's talk price point. This yoke is in the same price point as my SateTech X50, or no, what was it, the SateTech ProFlight yoke, which I got many years ago, and it didn't last very long for me. I had some issues with stiction and a couple other switches not working. But this yoke right here, guys, honestly, it kind of blows my mind that it's at the price point that it is. Now, right off the bat here, looking at the yoke, it's very well done. The construction is very professional. They have this wonderful, nice rubber type, I don't know what you even call this on the outside of the yoke here, but it's very good. It helps you get a nice grip on the yoke, and then the top here is a smooth plastic with your buttons and a steel shaft here for the pitch and roll axis. So I'm not going to do a full unboxing. I don't think you guys want to see me take it out of the box, but just know that it is heavy duty. It's about a foot long on your desk, and in the back here you have little switches you can control, you know, your lighting setting there for the background here. You got the nice red lights. Really quick, let's just go over it. You guys know what it looks like by now, but you know you have switches that you can bind here. We're going to do a quick little lap around the pattern in the Cessna 172. That's because I think this yoke really fits light aircraft right now. It flies phenomenally with any airplane and X-plane, don't get me wrong, but just, you know, the master switch here in the avionics buses, it reminds me of a light GA aircraft. So that's what we're going to fly today. We're going to do a lap in the pattern with this yoke. Everything here is bound by default out of the box to the default airplanes. Now I've made some adjustments. That's why you can see some of my stuff is not bound properly right now, because I've made some adjustments for what I like personally. Now the one thing I will say, word of caution, if you are like me and you have a setup for a combat sim, so I fly a lot of combat simulators, I have my thrust lever on the left side of my setup here. I use the SateTech X56 OTAS. Now, I have a Warthog stick, which I use on the right side, and my thrust levers are on the left side. The problem with the HoneyComb flight yoke is I want to fly with my left hand, right? Because I want to simulate being in the captain's seat. The trim is on the left side of the yoke. The problem is if I'm flying with my left hand on the yoke, I don't have a hand for my throttles because I don't have a proper throttle quadrant for civilian sims. This is no fault to HoneyComb. This is just my setup right now, and I want to just get this out there so if you guys are in the same position as I am. So what I've had to do is I have to fly with my right hand, and I've had to bind these roll trim switches. You can see here 5 and 6 and 3 and 4. I think I bound 5 and 6 to pitch trim up and pitch trim down. So it's very counterintuitive and very difficult for me to get over this mentally. If I want to pitch up, I have to press left, and if I want to pitch down, I have to press right. So that's my only issue right now with this yoke, is it's causing me to have a brain fart, and I'll be flying and it's almost like, what do I need to trim up or trim down? Which way does it go? That's my fault, not HoneyComb. So I will be pre-ordering their throttle quadrant when it comes out. Just a word of caution, though, if you guys have the similar setup to mine, you may find that a little bit funky and have to come up with a way to get over that. All right, so with that being said, last thing, let's go ahead and look at the axes here. So let's talk about roll first. The roll axis is very well done. It's nice and smooth, buttery smooth. I actually have a roll here. I didn't want this. I want this to be a linear roll. So I switched profiles. That's why it was not there. So I use my roll axes in almost a linear fashion, and I find it to be really well done. It's almost, when you fly light aircraft and you have the yoke that goes 90 left and 90 right, it's almost 1-to-1. It feels great in the sim. So roll, no problem, nice and smooth, nice and light on the controls, but it doesn't feel too light, doesn't feel plasticky. It feels nice. It feels realistic to me. It feels realistic. Let's talk about pitch real quick. The pitch, you can see here, I have a slight little curvature in my pitch, and that's because out of the box, this pitch axis is much stiffer than I was anticipating. Now, when I say stiff, I don't mean sticky. It's buttery smooth all the way in and all the way out. The only thing is, it is a lot stiffer than I thought. And if I would equate it to the Thrustmaster Warthog, if you have a Warthog side stick, imagine that feedback 2 times, maybe 3 times heavier in the pitch. So it's pretty significant. If you're flying with one hand and you want to push down, like it almost feels uncomfortable to push past, right here. And it's very hard to get those super fine movements, especially I've noticed when I'm flaring. I want to come back and it's fighting me too hard. So I almost have to fly with the trim, which is something you don't want to do. Now, I don't know if this is a design feature of it being this stiff or if something got messed up in shipping. And the reason I bring that up is because here in Texas, it's very hot in the summertime. And when my throttle quadrant was shipped to me, the grease and lubrication that they had on the throttle quadrant got so hot during the shipping process, it actually melted and got gunked up and it came off the rollers and stuff. And I got very funky behavior from my throttle quadrant. So what I ended up doing was cleaning it all off, re-greasing it, and I haven't had a problem since. I can only wonder if maybe there's something like that happening inside of my HoneyComb, but it doesn't really feel that way. It feels consistent, so it almost feels like it's designed to be this stiff. Now, maybe after some use, this spring will stretch out a little bit, and it'll be a little bit easier to make those real fine control movements. So I can make, especially when you're flying with one hand, I can make, fine control movements about 1.5 inches in and 1.5 inches out. No problem. But if I need to go more than that, you can see my desk almost starts to move. That's how heavy that pitch axis is. So I don't know if that's just me not being used to the yoke or if that's a design feature of how it's supposed to be. But anyway, let's go ahead and take this airplane up for a spin. Get the remainder of our lights on. And let's do a quick flight control check here. You can see the roll. Let's go ahead and do a left. Beautiful. I mean, that roll is phenomenal. Come out, cross over, and then in. Beautiful. I mean, it's smooth all the way around. It's just a little bit stiffer than anticipated on the pitch axis. All right, let's go ahead and take it for a lap around the pattern. So you can see I'm not white knuckling, but I'm significantly pulling aft to get that pitch up. And you see how it wants to fight me back down. So now I'm just gonna trim it out a little bit more. And now we're pretty much hands off. So I'm just using the trim a little bit more than I was expecting to be using the trim with this yoke. All right, let's go ahead and make our crosswind turn. So smooth, especially that roll axis is just unbelievable butter. A little bit of trim down here as we get ready to level off at 1,500 feet. And we'll make our turn to the downwind leg. And we'll roll out and level out at 1,500 feet. Go ahead and reduce those throttles. Leveling out in this airplane with this yoke is phenomenal. I mean, it feels very good, very smooth. And we'll trim here for a level flight, about 105 knots on the downwind. Very nice. All right, the runway is halfway up the wing strut there, so we have proper spacing on our downwind leg. As we approach the touchdown zone on the runway, we'll go ahead and reduce the throttle. Let the aircraft begin a descent. Trim it for about 600-700 feet per minute. Below 110, flaps 5. We're going to counter that balloon effect there with the yoke. You see how it wants to balloon when you get that first notch of flaps in. That's very true to real life as well in the Cessna. We'll make our we'll make our base turn here. As we turn base, we're looking for about 75 knots. We'll go flaps 2, counter the balloon. A little bit more trimmed down. And we'll turn to final. We want to be about 65 knots on final approach. We'll get our full flaps in there out of the turn. A little bit early. And there's that balloon effect. We'll counter that with the yoke. We'll set power and pitch for about 65 knots on the descent for our final descent here. Undercut that turn a little bit. You could tell I'm definitely an airline guy. I haven't flown a visual traffic pattern in quite some time. A little bit of wind out of the left there, coming over the mountains. 65 knots. We're on final. Trimmed out. Airplane is flying wonderfully. So with the airplane trimmed for 65 knots, when I used to land the Cessna, I would close the throttles, give it 2 swipes of the trim wheel in the nose up position, and then just flare it out. So we'll close it up, get 2 swipes of the trim wheel there, and we're just going to hold a nice pitch attitude for touchdown. A little firm there. Right at stall though, a good landing, or technically by definition, a landing is made at a full stall in a light aircraft. Alright guys, so in wrap up here, my final thoughts on the HoneyComb yoke. Is it priced properly for the product? Absolutely. I think the quality of this yoke definitely fits its price point. I have no qualms there, so we definitely get a green check for price and quality of product. Now let's talk about duration. Like, is it going to last a long time? Obviously we don't know that for sure because this is a brand new product out on the market, but let me just tell you, it's going to be my assumption, and I'll back this 100%, is the quality that this yoke is made of. I don't foresee it having any issues without misuse. I mean, it is put together really well. It's really sturdy. I think it's going to last a long time. Obviously, time will be the final tell, but that is my opinion right now. As far as axes and button functionality, you guys know that my little setup with the buttons, I would have liked to seen them maybe put 2 types of trim switches on the right-hand side of the yoke. That way we could have some pitch trim for those that have left-handed throttles, but I understand that's just my setup, and not everybody's setup is the same. So not really a knock on HoneyComb, just maybe would have been something to have on there. The roll axis is buttery smooth, perfect, no problems with the roll axis. I love the roll axis the way it is. Pitch axis was just a little bit firmer than I anticipated. Maybe over time this will loosen up a little bit, but even as it stands right now, it's better than any other flight yoke that I have used on a desktop simulator. So overall, guys, I think this is a great product, and I'm looking forward to seeing more products from HoneyComb out, especially their throttle quadrant when that is released. Thanks for checking out this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any questions about the yoke, go ahead, pop it down here in the comment section. I'll try to get back to you. Thanks for tuning in.